So welcome to another amazing episode of Love Vocals Nation. But this time we are bringing you a brand new series called True Talk, where we uncover the secrets of the music industry and speak our truth. Today, we are excited to welcome our new co-host and producer and DJ, David McLelland, known for his work as Amos and Riot Night. For those who know me, I'm Antonia Lucas, a singer and songwriter, and I'm joined by my talented co-host, Linnea Schossow. In this series, we will be bringing loads of amazing guests to join the discussion and inviting you, our listeners, to share your thoughts on industry issues and, of course, speak your truth.
So as part of this new series, we've invited well-known artists from within the music industry to dive deep into the topic that everyone's curious about. So for our very first episode, we have an incredible lineup of guests. Please welcome, first of all, Jaren, a celebrated singer and songwriter, and Andrew Kime, also known as Trinitro, an esteemed producer within the dance music space, primarily within trance and techno, but he is also involved within other parts of the industry. So welcome to everyone, and we're glad to have you all on the first show for True Talk.
Welcome, yay!
Let's kick things off by diving into today's topic, which we've chosen for a very specific reason. So as hosts, we came together to brainstorm how we should launch this new spin-off, True Talk. And during our meeting together, we bounced around the ideas on important subjects and how to discuss these things. However, we soon realized that we were all nervous about topics to bring to the podcast. And we said that we had to be very careful of how we say things, because we feared that we would get backlash and that the music industry would basically cancel us.
Yeah.
So that's when it hit us. This is our topic. Today's discussion is titled, The Fear of Speaking Up as an Artist. So we're going to open the panel for all of our listeners. So get your fingers on the keyboard and give us your thoughts and get involved. So let's start around the table with a question. Jaren and Andrew, in your experience, what are the primary reasons artists are afraid to voice their opinions or concerns? What do you think?
I can speak for myself, and I think I can speak on behalf of, I would say, predominantly the female artists that I've ever worked with who have chosen not to speak out about these things. And that is obviously the fear of getting blacklisted and having your career completely nullified, basically, like you can't do anything. It's happened to artists that I know personally. I think in the last episode, we spoke briefly about, there was this has happened to several of like the female artists that I've ever worked with, but there are a couple in particular who to this day will not speak out about the music executives, plural, who abused them very, I won't get into details, but they abused them very, very, is awful. And they won't speak out against it because they know if they do this, they're not going to be able to work again. And so one of the girls told me, I'm waiting until my career gets to a certain height before I'm able to come out about this. Because if I can manage it on my own and I don't need that whole side of the industry to support me, if once I get established enough that my fan base can support me, then maybe I'm going to be okay. And so they've chosen to say nothing about it for that reason. So I understand from really that perspective. I would say that's a predominant perspective that I'm aware of and that has affected the women in my life, let's say.
It's really sad to hear that. Yeah. Are there any kind of stories you're willing to share without names?
I can give you a personal experience that happened to me actually when I was 19. And also I have to say I consider myself extremely lucky because I've only been sexually assaulted a couple times in this industry in my entire career. And one of them could have gone much worse. And I'm so thankful that I have always been really in tune with my gut. and my gut feeling when things feel a little bit off. When I was 19, I had been scouted by, this was back in the time when MTV was still a big thing. I had been scouted by, I guess he was like considered a star maker. How he found my stuff, I don't remember. It was probably, we were probably doing MySpace back then. Like, I don't know. Anyways, he had invited me for a meeting and he's like, listen, I think I could get you on MTV. Let's have a meeting. And I was like, holy shit, dude, this is massive. Okay, cool. And we didn't have Google Maps then. It was like MapQuest or something. Anyways, he gave me an address. And at some point I realized, after having, I don't know how I looked up the address or what, I realized it was at a hotel. And I had just been given an address and a number. And so I thought, oh, it's like an apartment or like an office space. And it wasn't uncommon at that time, especially in Los Angeles, to meet in hotel cafes or hotel restaurants to have business meetings. There were a few really well-known spots where you could have your coffee, have a business meeting, and be, you know, overlooking the ocean. It's really cool. I thought maybe it's one of those instances, but there was something that was nagging me. And finally I was like, well, maybe I'm just going to ask him if I can bring somebody. And then I thought, no, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just show up with somebody. And then that didn't feel right either. So I finally reached out to him. I said, listen, is it okay if I just bring someone? It's just, no offense, but we don't really know each other that well. But, you know, is that okay? Thinking like an adult response would be like, sure, no problem. Right. He flew off the handle. How dare you ever ask me that stuff? Why would you ever ask if you can bring someone? You don't ask if you can bring someone. You bring them. They can wait outside the hotel room. And I was like, wow. What? And so I said, okay, well, I'm sorry, but I just don't feel comfortable with this. And he was like, okay, well, your loss. Good luck to you.
Well, I don't think
and so then there was a way, and I can't remember if it was like how old is Reddit? I don't even know, but there was some sort of way of like Googling something. And I remember, I think I typed in like this guy's name and like reviews or like testimonials or something, just to kind of see if he was legit. And like, there was this forum, these postings of all of these singers in Los Angeles saying, beware of, he told me he'd get me on MTV if I did this, this, and this. Wow. And, you know, and I suffered the abuse of that. And so I was terrified after that because I thought, shit, this guy has my name. He is a star maker. Maybe he has some sort of like a list or something. And he's going to be like, hey, don't bother going to that girl's, whatever, showcases or whatever, because, you know. So I remember being really nervous about that. I remember being really relieved, like, oh, thank God I listened to my gut and I didn't go. But, you know, and also I feel like this industry, it's very, you get sucked into your own bubble, right? And you start kind of living around your own bubble and your own recognition or whatever. So it's easy to get caught in the throes of what you're doing and not think outside of that. So I had no idea, like, I don't know how many singers there were in Los Angeles doing what I was doing at the time, probably thousands and thousands and thousands. Wow. But I was really concerned, like, what if this guy like ruins my career because he's mad because I like didn't go to his hotel room. And now as an adult of like a teenage girl, I'm like, oh my God, my poor mother, if she had known this was a possibility, she would have.
That's really quite a scary story, to be honest with you. How old were you?
19.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That's really young, that, and potentially as like coming into adulthood, like for that age, it's still considered vulnerable. And I think like we've heard a lot in the press over the years following the whole Me Too movement of what happened in the film industry and how prevalent that was there. So to hear it happening within the music industry at different levels and not just at the very top, it is sad, you know, that people can take advantage and they are essentially abusing a position of trust, as it were.
I've heard so many stories when I tell you, like, and I keep reading about it too, people saying, you know, that we are just at the very tip of the iceberg with the music industry. Shit is going to come down like an avalanche with the music industry soon. Like all these pop stars are supposedly going to be coming out and talking about their experience. And I think one reason I think maybe there's a grain of truth to that is that I see a lot of the women in sort of my generation that were going through that in the earlier part, like back in the 2000s, early 2000s, the 2000s and the 2010s, are now like me. We're parents now, and we're like, we would never let our kids do that. So we're at that age now where we're having kids, and we're like, oh, whoa, we need to set a new example. We're talking about this.
Well, and I think that's absolutely right. And I think that I mean, I think I've been personally quite lucky. Certainly when after my first release, I was lucky. All the people I seem to be working with, certainly as co-writes, were quite, you know, decent people. But I had an experience myself when I was 18, and it was absolutely humiliating. And at 18, you're thinking to yourself, I really want this gig. I really want to do this. And then not knowing what is right and what is wrong, you're kind of in the dark. And then there's this older guy, in my case, this older guy who was clearly a bit of a sleaze or even a bit of a pedo. And he was, now on reflection, looking back, and he was just like an astonishing manipulator and a real predator. And so yeah, it's horrendous. But luckily later on in things, you know, I was lucky. I think really lucky, truthfully. So I'm really sorry, Jaren. That's
I consider myself to have like escaped a lot of that stuff. I'm really lucky, but a lot of very close people in my music circle did not, yes, and are still dealing with the consequences. And I feel it for them. I'm nervous for them. And now I have a 13-year-old who's like getting into the music industry. Like, she's not trying to be a star. She's going to be featured on some songs coming up. And if you would have asked me like 10 years ago, like, hey, would you let your kid be in the music industry? I'd be like, absolutely not. Right. My life. And now I'm like, wait a minute, I have to back up here. How do I support her dream and also try to keep her protected from this? Because now we have new language around this. We're all more educated than we were when we were young and 19, and we didn't have the support system or the language to express ourselves. Now I think we're very different, and we're looking back and going, okay, we know that we cannot continue forward in this manner. So what are we going to do about it? And I think that's why podcast episodes like this are really important, to talk about those things. What are those changes that can be made? What can we do about it?
Right.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
This is one of the reasons why we have this podcast as well, to educate those artists that has been in the industry for a long time, but might feel that they're alone and they have felt alone. Know that you're definitely not alone. We're so many artists that has gone through everything. But also this podcast is for those who are coming into the music industry, want to get educated, want to learn a little bit. And we are a bunch of artists that are here to support your journey. And I wish, I guess, that I had that when I started out, because I didn't have this platform at all. And that is why we do this, right? So we want to do changes, see changes in the music industry. But going back into like why people are scared to speak up, I think listening to, you know, what managers are saying or what labels are saying, and if there's a predator in that label or management, then it can turn really, really bad. And I feel like we need to put the profiles up. Like, who are we afraid of? Is it the label managers? Is it the management? Why can't we take control over that ourselves? I believe that we can. I believe that in the near future, that artists will come more and more independent compared to what it has been, because artists today can basically run their own business without sending music to a label, without having a manager telling you what to do, because, you know, the social media is your door, so you can have fully control.
If you don't mind me just jumping in,
Yeah.
I think any person in a position of power is potentially somebody who could do that. I have to say here that there's a lot of great people in power that are willing to help people out, and they're really, really cool and really kind and really honest. But it's unfortunately a kind of predatorial playground, if you will, or landscape for that kind of behavior. And I think, I know we're not really addressing the fully, obviously, why people are afraid to speak out, but in just that one thing. But I genuinely believe that if more people had the courage to step up and say, you know what, I'm not going to mention any names, obviously, but this is what happened to me, then we start getting a clearer image of what people are handling out there, just because they genuinely want to make music, something they love, you know, and that's really sad.
I think about the legal ramifications too, you know, like I think a lot of people, I in my past have been worried about legal ramifications. If I step up, absolutely. Like if I publish this article, if I say this, what if I get sued for like defamation or something, you know what I mean, of character? And it's like, I'm not trying to defame anybody. I'm talking about what happened in my experience. And also, I don't want this to happen to other people.
Right.
And I think so many of us stay quiet because we're so afraid of like, who are going to be the big bad wolves like coming after us if once this comes to light, you know? And also I got to say too, this is not obviously a woman specific thing, what I was just talking about. I do know, I've heard of many stories of young guys being groomed by producers and stuff as well. And I think that's something that has to be talked about too, because that is definitely not talked about very often.
Right.
And I think the language guys have is like, you don't talk about it, that's worse.
I think just to bring Andrew in, actually, I think obviously as males ourselves, I think there does seem to be this culture amongst men to keep silent and not talk about these kind of things. Or I suppose it also ties in with the whole mental health issue that's only recently has that conversation really started to come through to the forefront.
Yeah, and I think that something that anyone needs to do, like men or women, is call it out if you see it. Like it to me, there's no use in being silent. And I've actually even with people I know in the music industry have offered, hey, if anything seems weird from with either messages, contracts, or anything, send a screenshot over it. I'll read what I think it is. No harm, no foul. And to me, it's, you know, it's crazy what some people will try to pull over on new producers that I've seen from some of my friends and other instances. To me, it's kind of a sad situation where, you know, you have a person who doesn't know what the right answer is or doesn't know what the industry standard is. And then on top of that, you have predatory, you know, situations that then get put into that. There's a whole lot of issues with just the entry into the music industry that people don't say enough about to get the information out there so that people know what to look for, know what to be mindful of, and know how to support themselves. So I think there's a lot around that can be done.
Absolutely. So I've recently signed a contract, and it's a collaboration on a well-known trans label with 3 other people. And these guys have been in the music industry for a pretty long time, I would say over 10 years. So they would know their way around. They are very hungry and they want to be in the top. Like everybody wants to. Everybody wants to be in the top. They want to be, you know, getting the gigs, getting popular and things like that. Everybody has a dream, you know. And so when we were sent the contract over from this record label, I asked all of them, are you guys okay with this contract? Because I can see that they're taking nearly 80% in royalties. And also they want to keep our rights, mastering rights for forever. That means that we cannot do anything with it in the near future. And I asked them, are you guys aware of this? And they're like, no, but this is standards. Like this is normal in the contract. I was like, no, it's not. It's definitely not. So what I noticed as an artist is people or artists overall, it could be singer, songwriter, it could be musician. They are really eager to get their song released. And they're super honored that there is a label that believe in them, which is really cool. But they would sign away all the rights, all the royalties. And then when the royalty statement hits, for example, there's nothing. I asked them, are you willing to sign this? Because I think this is not a great contract. I said, I'm willing to go back to them to ask for changes. And they were all very hesitant, and they were very scared of going back to the label, asking for their right splits and to keep their mastering rights after 10 years. And that was strange to see, because without the artist, the label won't exist. But the artists are scared of the label to ask for what they are worth, basically. So that is like one fear that I've noticed recently. Antonia, you want to go ahead?
I do, because I just want to jump in and just tell you my little. I mean, I've been away for 10 years, and I just finally got my new track coming out, and after all the years of stuff I know and I understand contracts, and I made sure that I had a collaboration contract signed with the parties involved. And when the label finally sent through their contract, I didn't like it. So I wanted to, negotiate. And just so for anyone listening, you can negotiate record deals, okay? Just so you know this. Anyway. So
louder for the people in the back.
So I went back to one of the producers that I was working with, and I said, who was speaking to the label, was kind of the middle person. And I said, I need to, here's an email. I need to send this email and, do a negotiation. And he was very funny with me, on and I thought, oh, here we go. And then finally, I kept, holding my boundary and with it, till finally he said to me, he wouldn't let me speak to the label. Finally, he said to me, why are you causing problems? And I thought, here's me, all these years down the line, I'm still dealing with people. And, I don't think that it's people that are nasty or bad. I think it's people that are quite ignorant, or, as Linnea's just said, desperate. They're so hungry. They so want this track out that they don't want to get cancelled. So I just had to deal with that recently. So that wasn't pleasant. So yeah, just wanted to share that one.
Well, and if I can hop in about contracts, so that's one thing that I've tried to help anyone that wants to ask is, like, when they get a contract with their new, is this normal? Mm-hmm. Is this the industry standard? I've in both my music and career life, I've actually had a lot of experience with contracts and what those should look like, and that's a blessing and a curse, because you get to see what is standard and then what some people try to pull on some others, and there's a lot of back and forth with that. I think you should always feel free to be able to negotiate. I don't think that should be frowned upon in any situation. Sometimes I think there needs to be clarity around, like, if for example, if a record label is taking a bigger cut than others, you should be able to ask why. And if they go, well, I have a 10-person marketing team that does nothing but do all this extra stuff. Oh, okay, so that maybe makes a little more sense. Like, that's something that that's something they're bringing to the contract that I'm not, for example. Mm-hmm. So there should never be an issue with asking about that. It can be frustrating though. I've seen a lot of people who don't even want to bring that topic up. Like, oh, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, and to me that's that's never a good thing, because it just sets whatever you start at. That's what you're setting the bar at.
I agree, and it was just really sad, because it started off terribly exciting, and then this kind of foobar was thrown in, and it made me feel very dismissed and devalued, and that's everything that Linnea and I are kind of like been fighting to change. Interestingly, Andrew, may I ask you, what would you say? I know this is a bit of a sort of like global question, but what would you say is a fair contract these days? A fair split?
I mean, with a label out the gate, I mean, I always start at, I think 50-50 is always fair. I have seen 60-40 in the label favor, and a lot of times that comes with, what are they providing for you? And that's actually when I ask that question is most of the contracts I've seen in my experience are 50-50, but the ones that I've seen that are not, I asked, and they were like, well, it has to do with some of the, the promotion we're going to do around the track and these other things, and ongoing, things that we need to kind of support. Well, that makes sense to me. And as an artist, you also have to, make a decision to, sometimes, I guess, play the game is the best way I could just describe it. Is, and I'm not trying to tell any artist out there to sell yourself short. I'm not trying to say that at all. What I am saying is, sometimes, you may see a contract that seems like it's not that you want. Let's say you want more, like a higher split or something, but in the long run, you could argue for that, but you should maybe try to show your worth with that intro contract. And so that's one thing that I think a lot of people need to think about is, a lot of times labels are gambling on the artist. They're hoping that you're going to sell the track well. And if you don't, well, that's like a slot they've lost, and revenue they've lost because they haven't sold a lot of records through you. And my biggest thing that I try to tell everyone is, if you can show you have skin in the game, it's amazing how far it'll go. Whether it be, hey, I'll do a 40% split on this initial one, but if it does really well, I'd like to see, a 50-50 on the next one, or maybe an advance for my next track. So you guys pay me up front. And that goes a long way in so many ways, just, showing, hey, I'm willing to work with you, but, this is a two-way street. And I've never seen a negative response for someone wanting to put effort into something. And so that's my feedback on that is, start at 50-50, but if you have to go to 40-60, like, ask why, but also maybe negotiate. If this does really well, what can we do down the line so that you can get, a better split the next time, or a pay advance or anything like that.
I like that. So
I have a question.
Go ahead. No, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you guys have any, like, what would be like some resources that people who are wanting to get into the game could use when it comes to contracts and things like that? Because my experience is very different, because when I got started, I already had a manager who was my business partner, excuse me, and he was a shark. He was great. Like, he went in, but to Andrew's point, we did have that in the beginning, that talk about, like, well, you're brand new, they're gambling on you, so just do what you can to get your foot in the door on this one, knowing that if it works out, blah, 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 blah. What I have seen, there was a time in the late 2000s, and I've seen it a little bit now too, where people are asking now for just like a buyout, like work for hire. I'll pay you for this. Like, I get hit up for those all the time. I could pay you X amount of money for this, and like no royalties. And I'm like, I don't do work for hires. But I don't think a lot of people know that. And so sometimes I'll get hit up by somebody wanting to get into the field, on my Instagram or something in my DMs, being like, hey, do you think, like, should I just do like a song like for free just to get my name out? And I mean, I guess if you want to, but like, if something happens to that song and it gets really picked up, you are swimming up shit creek without a paddle, man. Like, good luck.
You should always protect yourself. That's one thing is, there's doing something at, a slight deficit to yourself just to get exposure, whatever. But you should never leave yourself open to something that can actually be very bad. And so I guess to answer your question on resources, there isn't a lot out there. I myself was very lucky to have, a manager and a really good mentor behind me when I first started getting into the music industry. And since I had that experience, I've actually gone and, I've over COVID took on, about 6 students / mentees, I guess you could say, to help them, navigate that as well. But I personally, I can't think of any resources out there for contracts or knowledge bases. And I don't know, David, do you have any that you can think of? I can't think of any offhand.
No, I can't really. And even when I started out getting into the business like years ago, like there wasn't that much out there in terms of resources at all. It was very much like you could call it like learning on the job and then learn with experience. But as the topic often comes up later on down the line, if something did take off, the last thing you want to happen is for you to be completely burned at the end of it all. There's no two ways about it, really.
So as you said, that there has been no place to get educated, but over the last 13 years, me and Antonia have worked really hard on creating a platform for musicians where they can get educated. They can learn about contracts, what is right, what is wrong, what you should ask for in a collaboration, what you should ask from a label, what kind of things you should look for in a contract. We're launching something called lovevocals.com, and this is going to be a massive hub for musicians so they don't feel lost when it comes to these kind of questions. Antonia, you want to jump in?
Well, you just want to jump in and say, going back to our original topic, which was about, predators and such. One of the resources within this platform is going to be for, and I'm thinking like, mothers and fathers whose children want to actually, jump out into the music industry and they don't know where to go because they're at the mercy of, companies. So we're offering a resource to educate people so that they know what to potentially look out for. And so at least they go armed with some kind of information that when they meet the dodgy person, the flag goes up. So that's just one of the resources that we're offering out there. And equally, still on the topic of the first thing we talked about, is we also bringing mental health to support musicians. So people that have gone through really difficult times can come and speak to other musicians who are qualified professionals and help them navigate that and overcome those traumas. So that's another thing we're doing with this platform.
I have a question. Is this more to is this leaning like industry specific, like in terms of like business and stuff, or could this be like general and stuff? Because I know because I worked in pop as well, and it's a totally different beast in terms of contracts and all of that stuff. Going back to your point about the parents, I think this is amazing because I was contacted recently by a parent asking if I would put together a course for other parents because I'm going through that right now with my daughter going, oh shit, how do I support her, but also keep her protected? It's such a chaotic thing. Right. And I will tell you how important it is because I know someone who signed with a manager who signed her rights to a publishing company for 10 years. She cannot release anything for 10 years, any of the stuff that she had before. It caused such financial hardship that her parents divorced.
Oh my goodness.
Mom had suffered a major health event. To be able to have a place where you can go and have the resources, I think is absolutely invaluable. Because the other thing too is I don't know about if you guys have kids, this whole thing, social media, great. It's democratized making music. It's democratized the industry. This is awesome. There's so many positives about it. But then there's also this new culture coming in where there are, families going, my kid's talented. They want to be a star. And then they're pushing their kid to do all of these things. And there's the mental health component, which you mentioned, just trying to reach the parents of those kids and to protect the kids, educate the parents, help them out because it is not an easy road. It can be incredibly fulfilling, but those contracts, man, you got to watch out. And this was somebody that was super, super trusted by the family, completely robbed them of 10 years.
Wow.
I mean, once it doesn't happen that often, but there are the few people that give a really bad name to the rest of the people that are really in it for the good and really trying to help.
Yeah.
It's true.
Well, I guess a few things. I've quite you guys make me write a bunch of notes. This is a great conversation. First off, I would love to be any way I can help with this resource database you're putting together. Would love to be part of that.
Awesome.
For any artists out there listening to this, especially in the trance, techno, progressive scene, if you message me on any of my socials and say, "Hey, heard your True Talk, have a question on something," I will do everything I can to support that. Just going to put that out there. I really think that's a big part is people don't even think to ask. They don't even hear that it's a possibility to ask someone, whether it be someone they know personally or even just an artist that they've seen or heard of. When it comes to contracts and stuff, any contract that makes you financially responsible for something that's out of your control, especially, is a bad contract. You need to hear that. Like if there's a verbiage in your contract that says, if this doesn't sell X amount, you are responsible to cover this amount of money. No, that's not a good contract in your favor. That's a very predatory contract, and most labels will not do that. I've not seen one of those in person. I've heard of those, but I've never seen one. But if that ever comes up, just say no.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Because that's really bad. Especially, I'm so sorry to hear about your friend's parents that they divorced her. That's so
it's terrible.
Crazy.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's so terrible. I don't think it happens so much in the trance music industry, like electronic music overall, but more likely in the pop music industry.
This was in pop. Yeah, because the
exactly.
copyrights are so much smaller in EDM.
Yeah, exactly. So I've heard I don't know if you guys know who JoJo is, but she's been in movies and such. But she was also tied to a contract because when she was young, she had one hit called "Little Too Late," and it blew up worldwide, and it made her like a big famous star. But she didn't realize that she signed a contract where they kept her hostage for I think over 10 years also, where she wasn't allowed to release music for 10 years. And that is something that I notice sometimes, that an artist comes into the music industry and they blow off. They have this amazing song, or they're a part of X Factor and everybody loves them, and then suddenly silence, and you keep wondering, where did they go? And I start to dig into this, like, where did they go? And it comes up that they're tied to bad contracts, right? And they were scared to actually say anything. They didn't maybe understand the contract. It's
I can tell you, I auditioned for American Idol like the second year that it was out.
Right.
And I got there and they make you sign this contract full on. Like this was back in the early days, ages ago. And I got there for the audition, and before everybody's auditioning, they don't care. They're sure, let me sign this. And then they go. I think one of the reasons back then you wouldn't hear from anybody was because they had a clause in there, if I remember correctly, about like, you cannot release any music or you can't do anything for, it was like a certain term after the reign of whoever was the winner or whatever. Right. And so then you had to be, you couldn't release music. You couldn't do anything. And that was just like in the fine print there, like for people. So Andrew was talking about like contracts and stuff. And this is another thing I really want to like tell people, if you're new to this and you get a contract from somebody, do not hire the local lawyer who is not specific to the entertainment industry to negotiate your contract. Because in my friend's case, it was like the family lawyer. It was not the lawyer who knew about. And so they thought, oh, well, this looks like a good deal. 10 years. Yeah, if this works out, this is great. And then, the family was obligated. They were run into the ground. They had to pay for all the trips where the kid gets sent across the US and Europe to do all these writing things. Well, the parents have to pay for that. So don't find someone, Google them. You can find them online, find a reputable agent. And actually, I think something that you can do, I know it's super fucking costly in the beginning. You might have to shell out for your first contract, but if you have a contract, let's say it's really specific to a certain genre or whatever, you have no idea how to negotiate it, it might be worth hiring a lawyer specific to that.
Yeah.
One shot. Have them go with over the contract with you. I know this happened to me. I had a lawyer. I got my first record deal when I was 19, and so I sent the contract to this lawyer, and I thought it was okay. I had a few people look over it, and he chicken scratches, red ink, the entire thing, going, "Do you have any idea what this is?" But it was such a great learning opportunity, because after that, you could go back and see and go, oh, I could see his notes and go, oh, well, I can apply that to my next contract and make sure I'm not getting taken advantage of. So yeah, find the law thing, Andrew, spot on.
Yeah. And also I think it's worth saying that what's coming out is the fact that we're going to have legal people in there, and legal people who are going to be covering the UK, Europe. So we're bringing in different territories, and it's not just, fortunately, it's not just, it is covering EDM, but we're actually going all genres of music. So, and the idea is that it is going to be a trusted resource for people to come to, and hopefully it will grow and build, and more professionals will come in and offer to help, newbies coming up who really need to be educated to prevent this. And I just wanted to say, because when you were talking about these people who offer these contracts and behave in this way, what the hell are you thinking? What kind of people are you, really? Okay.
I'm asking myself these questions all the time. How do they sleep at night? That's what I want to know.
No, it's disgusting. We all know, what the passion, where that amazing passion and drive comes from to make fantastic music, and the honesty and the purity that comes from it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be cheesy, but it's people are preying on that purity, and I just think it's disgusting. Truly, sorry.
Especially when you're new and you're coming into it. The one thing I will say about EDM that I think has above any other genre that I know of, because that's my experience, is that it is the least ageist of the industries, of the music industries. Which I think is amazing.
Yes.
In pop music, a friend of mine, we were joking because she had a daughter who was 9 months old at the time, and we said, let's make a video about just how ridiculous the pop music industry is. And I said, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna be the mom. Here's my baby. I'm gonna pretend we're in a meeting, and I'm the agent, and she's gonna be pitching her 9-month-old daughter to me as this potential superstar, and I'm gonna be like, oh God, it's the age. I just think she's too old. 6 months perhaps, because that's really how it feels. But then when you're young, I felt when I was in Hollywood, it was I'm going to max out at 23, 24 at that time. And then my career is dead. So I have this much time to get that going. And that's when I make those stupid decisions, because that's when I feel rushed, and that's when everything feels urgent. So I think a lot of these young kids coming up, I think they're aware of it too. I don't know how you guys feel about it. I feel like youth are aware of it.
And I think I've mentioned, I don't know if it was yourself or maybe it was Amanda Wilson, we were talking about this. And that is why when I was signed to Telstar, I wouldn't tell them I had 3 children. Because I knew, because I looked 10 years younger than my age, I wouldn't tell them how old I was. But I knew if I'd mentioned I had 3 children, I was done. So I had to keep it quiet. It was really hard for 3 year. So, but that's the kind of thing they do in the kind of more pops, side of things. Yeah. So I hear that. Go ahead.
I mean, I've not had the experience, but I know in trance and electronic music, for example, it's a lot different. I mean, I actually love seeing that there's people you'll see someone who has had their first release in their late 40s or 50s, and something they've wanted to do their whole life, and there's not one person who bats it out at it. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
One more thing about contracts real quick that I want artists to also hear is that it's an ecosystem with you and the labels. So the labels do not exist unless they're putting out music. So know your worth and understand that. But also understand that labels have certain powers that you don't have. So a good example is if a label has 60,000 followers on their socials and you have 1,200, just use that. Right? If you self-release a track and you share it, by the time it gets through the algorithm, you're not getting a lot of spread. If that label shares it, that's one of those. That is the definition of an ecosystem. But don't ever sell yourself short. That's the biggest part about it.
I would say same for publishing too. Absolutely the same.
Yep.
And whatever you're signing, regarding like lawyers, there's a lot of lawyers out there that I know that they have like a flat fee for like just a contract review. And we definitely use those if you can't afford something like that. Don't if you can't afford it, do not sign the contract. If you can't afford it, try to see if there's someone you can reach out to.
Yeah.
I tell you, there's a lot of people who will gladly look at a contract really quickly and go, "This is a red flag," or "No, this looks generally good." Don't ever sign something because you want to get it done. I see a lot of people who are like, it hits their inbox and they're like, I want to get it back right away. No, take your time, read it. Just like with everything in life, you got to make sure you fully understand it. The other thing I have seen that can be detrimental to artists is kind of forced timelines regarding producing tracks and stuff. If you are not a full-time music producer and this is what you were doing for your day job, I guess you could say, do not agree to producing a track a month or whatever that timeline someone may want from you, because you don't know what could come up with your personal life, your professional career. Like if you have a day job, for example, and that ties directly back to the financial side of it. Is if you have a project to do with your day job and you have a deadline with music, and you miss your day job deadline for the music deadline and you get fired or something, and now you are in a financial situation. So that's something to really need to think about is, whatever you're doing in music, you need to make sure that long-term it is financially sustainable. If that means you have, a typical 9-to-5 that you can, that maintains your lifestyle, your family, things like that has to come first in a lot of cases. And if you're fortunate enough to make it to a point where you can fully do music production or just music industry stuff full time, then that's a different situation. But for most people coming into the industry, they are not full-time music producers, and that takes a lot to get there. A lot of the big names I even know personally still have some level of a part-time or day job that they use to kind of stabilize themselves. So that does not said a lot, but it's the truth, and just be mindful of that.
I love that. Thank you.
Question for you guys. Do you know, or do you suspect at all, like for the people, because to Andrew's point, the people that I know that do things full time, they're under like a pressure, right? Obviously to produce a certain amount, and like it could be hit or miss too. You don't know if your song's going to do well or whatever. Do you feel ever like there's also like, that maybe that pressure, that fear of retaliation, that pressure to not say anything because you work so hard to get there, and like, you just don't want to lose what you've just built. So we become
200%.
maybe slowly more tolerant of things that are not okay.
Yeah.
Right. You're right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because you are aware of how big of a job it was to get you to this point, right? In your career. Maybe you're touring the world finally. Maybe, they're bringing you to the label events and things like that. You're invited, I don't know, to the biggest pop event ever to sing as well. And you realize that something is wrong, but if you say something, you might lose it.
I mean, this is why I didn't work with you guys. All those years you guys were emailing me, and I was like, I just have to put my nose to the grindstone. I just have to not say anything, and I just have to do the work. And I'm not going to say anything because I know if I do, I'm not going to get any more work. Like, that's how I felt at the time.
From who?
Now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm like, oh man,
But from Jaren, from who?
From label side, in my experience, the labels, even when they're competing with each other, they all have, there's an inside connection back there that nobody talks about. They all know each other's business all the time. A lot of them talk to each other, communicate with each other. We were blacklisted a little bit. CMJ was for a time. And I mean, we heard about it through different, like various labels. So I really strongly felt like if I ever wanted to speak out about anything, it was maybe it would be taken out of context, sorry. And then then it's going to end up at a label. Label's going to be upset with me, and then I'm going to get dropped. But we got dropped anyways for our first album thing. So I don't know what the best thing to have done would have been.
Recently, I'm on A&R. I run a label, and on auditor recordings, we care about the quality of music. Obviously, if somebody would go against, do something absolutely horrific, I don't know, do something really, really bad, criminally or stuff like that, maybe the label wouldn't like to be associated with that. But for people to speak about different topics and stuff, I mean, why couldn't they? It's a part of their journey. So for us speaking today at True Talk and Love Vocals Nation as well, probably also raises eyebrows around the music industry.
Yeah.
Around me or Antonia. But we do it because we care about artists and we want to make a positive change in the music industry. And I'm not afraid because I have nothing to be afraid of, but it hurts to see artists being very afraid, not being able to, be themselves out there in the music industry.
But does that, I know, I'm sorry guys, I know, and I'm going to, because I want to ask everybody this question, but is there this sort of say about how we view ourselves and our value, that we are willing to sacrifice our value just keeping quiet, because we're sacrificing our value by keeping quiet? In any other industry, in any other business transaction, you could go in and say, I'm not comfortable with this. This is not making me feel okay. And this is actually damaging our value by choosing to do that. Again, that's where I'm going. What do you guys think about that?
You should always feel free to be able to ask the questions or talk to the labels and not have any repercussions. But with that comes a level of professionalism that goes a long way in my experience. I can't speak for if you already signed, let's say, a bad contract or something. That's a different situation. But what I'm talking for is for more intro to the industry. There's no one wants to be hard to work with. So you have to, that's there's a difference between being blacklisted and being hard to work with. That's a really key thing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't want to. They fear that they're going to be put into. They're going to be blacklisted. Or they're going to be labeled as hard to work with. But then there's knowing what you want from the situation. You're not being hard to work with if what you're being asked to do is against what you want to do. That's just you're holding true to your values. But so that, with all that being said, be professional. Ask the questions why, and if you find yourself in a bad situation, talk to people individually. I never recommend anyone just blast something on social media, because there's so much more that has gone into that maybe you haven't been aware of, or that other people haven't been aware of. And to me, it's like, talk with your representative at the label one-on-one and say, hey, I'm feeling this, what can we do so that we both feel like we're in a win-win situation? What can we do around that? Now, in my experience, every label I've ever worked with is very receptive and positive when it comes to that. I can't speak on pop or anything else. I'm just talking about electronic music, but you know, you really need to make sure that you know your respect goes both ways. And I've helped people write emails even to labels because they want to stand their ground or do something that aligns with what they want to do, but also show that they are open to kind of navigate that accordingly. And I think that there's not a lot of people get afraid of that. They're afraid to ever like speak up about something. It's not necessarily about speaking up. It's stating, hey, why is this the case, or how can we do X, Y, or Z, or maybe we do. An example I'll give is sometimes a label wants a specific sound and you want to produce something else, but you guys have already agreed to release this. Well, see if maybe you can have two different versions then. And that's an absolute win-win for everyone involved. I've even done that with some of my tracks where I've made a club mix, which aligns more with kind of what the mainstream push is, and then I've had my own version on the side of that, and that way everyone wins. There's not to me there's no losing in that situation. But you should always be open to finding those opportunities to feel like a win-win. And if you don't, then that's kind of a red flag. If you feel like you're working with someone that you cannot, show your worth to or speak your mind to in a professional way, then that's maybe not the situation you want to be in.
And I agree with everything that you just said, Andrew. Do you think, like, I kind of advise people to maybe, like, in a way to stand up for yourself, like coming really from the place of curiosity, right? If you're going to approach a label or an executive or somebody about what it is that you want, I think they can feel if you're coming from a place of genuine curiosity. Hey, is it okay if we do this? Hey, what about this? I'm not feeling like this. What do you think we can do to work together? As opposed to, oh my God, that's not going to work. Ba 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 ba. And the reason I say this is because I have been the asshole who did the second thing, where I'm just like, I'm so mad, I'm so tired. Yeah. I've been working on this for 10 years, and I'm like, it's going to go this way or I'm not doing it because I'm this worked up now because we haven't been able, where if I would have just been able to sit back and be like, hey, what do you think about this? I'm sure they would have been like, oh, sure, no problem. So learn from my mistakes, people.
I think that's a perfect way to put it is, approach it with curiosity, because sometimes you'll be surprised what you learn on the flip side. Mm-hmm. Oh, the reason they were asking for, let's just say a label goes, they signed the track and, you need to send your final master by this date. Normally that date is because there's literally a mountain of stuff the label has to do for releasing it, to send it to Beatport, send it to all the different entities involved to and you don't see, you're not privy to that as an artist. Sometimes you're just like, what's the big deal? As long as I get it to you, there's so much more. And when you ask those questions, you learn knowledge about the industry, you can learn how the system works. And you may find a new path forward where, that you weren't even aware of because you didn't know it existed. And I think that's a really big point is, again, professional understanding, sense of curiosity. You're trying to understand where they're coming from.
Love this so much, Andrew. This is so good. Good tips.
Labels are people too. The people you're talking with are also people. So
absolutely.
Everyone wants to be heard.
But also, exactly as you said, if they're not willing to, red flag. Like if they're just shutting you down left, right, and center, like red flag. Because there are those labels too. They're fewer and further between now, I feel like. But I've had experience with those as well. So.
Yeah. So I think the point to that is, to start valuing yourself. And if something doesn't feel right, if it feels uncomfortable, is to have the courage to say it. But to say it in a professional manner and a respectful manner. So.
But I think that's only starting to change like more recently, because many of the famous DJs that we all know and love and respect, I have heard behind closed doors, having a different set of values, let's say.
Yeah.